on Wednesday night, according to U.S. Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem. As per the officials, a suspect is currently in custody. Tal Noem Cohen, a spokesperson for the Israeli embassy, said in a statement that the two staff members were shot at close range while attending a Jewish event at the museum. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, has called the shooting a depraved act of anti-Semitic terrorism. The Israeli ambassador to the US, Yichel Leiter, also shared that two staff members were a young couple about to be engaged. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly said that he was shocked by the anti-Semitic murder and that security will be stepped up at Israeli embassies around the world. Metropolitan Police Department Chief Pamela Smith has stated that prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside the museum before he approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun and opened fire, striking both staff members. The suspect then entered the museum and was detained by event security. He continued to chant "Free Palestine" while in custody. The US President Donald Trump has expressed his condolences for the families of the victims and said that hatred and radicalism have no place in the United States. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that this was an act of cowardly anti-Semitic violence and that authorities would track down those responsible for the fatal shooting. Let's listen in to what the Israeli ambassador and the mayor of Washington had to say about the incident.
The couple that was gunned down tonight in the name of Free Palestine. It's a young couple about to be engaged. The young man purchased a ring this week with the intention of proposing to his girlfriend next week in Jerusalem. Together with President Trump, our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will stand together tall and firm, and we will confront this moral depravity without fear and with determination. And now we'll turn to taking care of the families.
What I do know is that the horrific incident is going to frighten a lot of people in our city and in our country. And I want to be clear that we will not tolerate this violence or hate in our city. We will not tolerate any acts of terrorism, and we're going to stand together as a community in the coming days and weeks to send the clear message that we will not tolerate anti.
We're now joined by Peter Baum, who's the foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, to discuss this in further detail. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. This was a sudden and an unprecedented event that happened today, shocking. I wanted to get your initial reaction to this. 2 people killed outside, 2 Israeli embassy workers killed in Washington, D.C.
Yes, it's obviously one of shock, but I must say of no surprise. Since the October 7th and all the protests and negative media coverage on Israel, acts of anti-Semitism have increased beyond any scale imaginable in major cities of Western democracies. And whether it's London, where we have a very weak mayor, and I must say a very pro-Palestinian mayor, or whether it's Toronto or whether it's cities in Australia, we have seen despicable acts of violence against Jewish organisations, Jewish individuals. And I think this killing in Washington is just an extension of what's been happening over the last 20 months in our major Western cities, where I'm afraid to say politicians and mayors, and let's not forget that Mayor Muriel Bowser in Washington is a very left-wing mayor, Washington being a sanctuary city, and I'm afraid, as I said, this is one of shock, but not one of surprise. What is surprising, however, is that given where the event was held, and ironically, I understand it was, although it was held at the Jewish Museum, it was an interfaith meeting. There were many people of non-Jews there, and it just so happens by chance, as we think, the young couple who were killed were both Israeli members of the Israeli staff. But I think this, what is surprising is the security around this particular event seems to have been less than it should have been, given the city, given the event, and given the place where it was being held. So I think that will have to be looked at. But again, as I say, one of shock but of no surprise.
Yes, and this is, as you've said previously, a string of anti-Semitic, reportedly anti-Semitic events that have happened since this war has started. I just want you to say how people should react to this. Should there be heightened security at these embassies? Should Israelis who are going out now be concerned about something like this happening? Australia, we've seen a real rise in anti-Semitism, as well as across Europe, and now the United States as well. Can I get your thoughts?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, I'm surprised that I would have thought that certainly around Israeli embassies, security was at its ultimate. This was not an embassy, it was a Jewish museum, but clearly synagogues, Jewish organisations, Jewish buildings where there are pro-Israel activists, pro-Israeli events going on, must indeed heighten security. It would be devastating if such events were cancelled, because that would have been given into terrorism. I think what Jewish people, what most morally decent people are concerned about globally, is the inertia with which politicians playing to, let's face it, a radical left-wing and Islamic mob, supported by a media which is very, very hostile to the Jewish state of Israel, have all combined to bring us to the situation where we are today, and this tragic shooting of a young couple doing nothing more than attending, as I say, what I think seems to be an interfaith event. The latest information we have is that the individual who is currently in custody doesn't seem to be part of a wider terrorist network, but that's early stage information, and when it's investigated more fully, it could be that he was a member and was radicalized by groups hostile to Israel. But clearly, I think the world's media and politicians who have caved in to these mobs on our streets shouting "Globalise the Intifada," and let's not mistake this. This is what "Globalise the Intifada" means.
Peter,
it means hostile acts towards Jews, with the ultimate aim of eliminating the Jewish state of Israel.
Peter,
I
apologies, we are running out of time. I just want to get this final question in. The chief suspect is a man called Elias Rodriguez. Police say that he shouted "Free Palestine" during the time of the attack. Some critics are saying that escalating tensions over the Gaza war are spilling over into the diaspora. What your response to claims that Israeli policies are increasing the threat environment abroad for Jews around the world?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting and pertinent question. And the only way I can answer that is with a question. You see, when, for example, Assad of Syria was slaughtering 600,000 Syrians, or when the Houthis in Yemen were slaughtering Yemenis, or when the Turks were bombing Kurds, we didn't see the marches, the protests, the anti-Syrian, anti-Yemeni, anti-Turkish media coverage, and therefore we didn't see any protests and we didn't see any marches. But when it comes to the Jewish state of Israel, Israel to the world at large is treated very, very differently. And I put it to you that it doesn't take much for the Jewish state of Israel to act how the world sees inappropriately before we see acts against Jews globally. We see nothing of the kind. We don't see any kind of anti-Islamic acts when totalitarian Islamic states like the Taliban, for example, start taking away women's rights, where Iraq, for example, start lowering the age of consent to 9 years old. So for Muslim states to act inappropriately, we don't see any hostility globally, quite rightly, in my opinion.
There is Islamophobia as well. Let's not distract from that.
Then that gives the excuse for anti-Semitism globally, and it's just an excuse about the Israeli government policy. It wouldn't matter what the policy was, there would still be this hostility towards Jews globally. And that's very, very concerning, very upsetting, and it seems like we haven't learned anything over the last 3,000 years.
Peter Bourne, thank you very much for your insight in joining us.